Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another Bond video. Sorry, it has been such a long time since I have done a Bond-related video, but I decided I decided because of the content, like I've been focused on doing other content and basically other things going on right now, I decided let's quickly get back into the videos as to why I've had this YouTube channel in the first place. So today we'll be doing my top 10 Bond kills. Now, keep in mind, this is all purely subjective, my personal opinion, and if you disagree and stick around to the video, hopefully some of your favorite deaths will appear on the list. But of course, as always, let's kick off with an honorable and dishonorable mention. Coming in a dishonorable mention is Bond kills Whitaker. Now, I want to say this. The Living Daylights is definitely a Bond film that is definitely very underappreciated. I do like how it brought Bond back to its roots to the more spy thriller that the series originally started off as. But throughout the whole Roger Moore Bond films, they lost sight of that. So as a result, yeah, this film brought the series back to basics. And despite what you may think of Timothy Dalton, I'm personally one of those who feel that he did an excellent job, and I like how he's gained more of a beloved following in recent years. However, must admit, this film had very bad villains and very bad Bond deaths, in my opinion. And Brad Whitaker is definitely one. Now, Brad Whitaker, I felt, really had the potential to really be a good Bond villain. I like how his gimmick is that he's obsessed with the military. I wish they could have done that too more differently. And also, I find his death to be just anticlimactic, really. I just saw no point in his death. And the whole scene itself, it's an okay scene, but I don't know, there's something about this death that just doesn't feel right. Unlike other Bond deaths, I like how they are done, but this one just feels very anticlimactic and just comes out of nowhere, too much for my liking. And as a result, that's why I put him as a dishonorable mention. Now, I do admit I did love the Bond's quip at the end of his death. I found that to be a nice touch. Now, despite the fact that I'm giving a bit of positives for his death, I'm sorry, but this is just not. I just didn't like it, and it's just not my favorite death. Now, our honorable mention goes to an iconic death in the series. Bond kills Kananga. Now, The Living Daylights was a film that rejuvenated energy back into the series and proved that there was life beyond Sean Connery. And Kananga was such a good death. Well, was such a good villain, and his death I found to be the turning point in the series that they were going to get more comedic, and this would be playing to Roger Moore's strengths. Now, I know it's silly, bizarre, and it's clearly, and basically the death is just an inflatable balloon, but basically the death was Bond and Kananga fighting in the water, and then he puts this pellet in him. It makes him expand into a balloon. He goes all the way to the top of the ceiling and explodes. It's comedic. It's absolutely ridiculous, but that's why I like it. It is completely ridiculous. I get a chuckle out of it. Now, I don't put on my top 10 because I just like 10 deaths more, or but I just always get just a chuckle every time I see it. It is meant to be a silly death, and with that being the case, I have absolutely no problems with that at all. I absolutely love it. Now, with the honorable and dishonorable out of the way, ladies and gentlemen, let's get on with the list. Kicking off our top 10 is, ladies and gentlemen, number 10, Bond kills Scaramanga. Now, the Man with the Golden Gun is often considered the worst Bond film, but we all can agree Christopher Lee does a tremendous and absolutely fantastic job in the role of Scaramanga, the Man with the Golden Gun. Now, why do I have his death at number 10? Well, I like the fact that the whole death, it's a sort of, the whole thing is a cat and mouse game. You see, it's a duel. Bond with 6 bullets going up against Scaramanga with his 1 golden bullet. And already, by this point, Bond has already fired 3 shots. Scaramanga hasn't fired yet, and he's lost his gun. And now he's in hiding. And Scaramanga doesn't know where he is, and we don't know where he is. So it's built up to where the hell is he? And Scaramanga's getting a little bit worried too. And eventually, out of nowhere, the Bond mannequin we saw at the beginning of the film is revealed to be Bond, turns around and shoots Scaramanga. And that face Christopher Lee gives Bond before he dies is just icing on the cake for me. I like it's a cat and mouse game. And I really feel the Bond films of nowadays, I wish they could employ more of that, more cat and mouse thing. I really dig it. And I also like how, even though you know the villain's gonna die, how he dies, for me it makes sense as like a duel. It made sense for Bond to kill him with his own gun. It made sense. What I found a bit more poetic if maybe Bond tackled him, took Scaranga's gun and killed him with his own gun, yes, I feel that would be a little bit more poetic, but at the same time, it made sense that Bond to use his reliable Walther PPK. Overall, I just like how this death was not just built up, but just how it was written, and I felt was executed absolutely perfectly. But it doesn't get any, but it doesn't get any higher on the list simply because of how I felt created, not just how created the other deaths are, how more built up the other deaths are, but at the same time, just how important the other deaths are to the Bond series as a whole. Speaking of importance, coming in at number 9, Bond kills Blofeld. Now, something to be told. Blofeld was Bond's nemesis, and he's been in several Bond films, especially during the 60s, the whole 60s era, basically Connery's whole film timeline. Now, I also liked how at the end of Diamonds Are Forever, we presume Blofeld is killed when his submarine crashes into his headquarters. However, I want to point out something here. I did not find that death absolutely amusing, and people thought that Blofeld was still alive. However, what ended up happening as to finally put an end to the whole Blofeld versus Bond saga and finally move on from the series was this death. Now, in the beginning of For Your Eyes Only, Bond is visiting the grave of Tracy, basically secretly bringing a continuity between basically all the Bond films, trying to bring it all together. And as he gets into a helicopter, it is remotely hijacked by a man who we are assumed to be Blofeld. They don't fully spell it out, it's Blofeld due to copyright issues at the time. But we definitely know it's Blofeld. He's bald, he's in a wheelchair, and he's petting a white cat. And instead of killing Bond, Blofeld just hijacks the helicopter and toys with him. And Bond, of course, is on the side. He's trying to make his way to the passenger seat. Now, I like how it's a classic example of, the villains don't want to kill their heroes immediately. They just want to toy with them a bit. But in the context, it made sense with Blofeld. It's clear he's lost everything. His whole organization, clearly his wealth and power, and he blamed Bond for all of it. And he finds it, and he wants to, have one last victory before he kills him. So it made sense to do all this toying. But it also is a bit interesting as he literally wants to kill him the same day he goes to visit his wife's grave. I find that a little bit poetic on the villain side. But of course, it is Bond. He does, you know, he does become triumphant, and he quickly takes control of the helicopter and reroutes it where he's in control. And Blofeld's cockiness eventually is his own undoing, which I dig. And as the helicopter comes after Blofeld, the cat abandons him, and Blofeld tries to escape. But what ends up happening was the landing bit of the helicopter goes through the bottom of the wheelchair, and he lifts Blofeld, essentially doing the same, taunting him, messing with him, just as he was doing with him. Blofeld's begging for his life. Roger Moore gets a few last quips in, and then, of course, drops him down a windy chute. Essentially, finally killing Blofeld, avenging Tracy, putting an end to that storyline. And overall, I just also like how it sets the tone of the movie and for the more grittier and darker deaths. Grittier for a Roger Moore film at least. And overall, just the overall tone. I like that whole scene, how it was filmed, how it was done, and the execution of it was so great. I also like it also brought an end to the classic Blofeld, and I felt he had to go out this way. I didn't mind it. I mean, if you wanted revenge for the death of your wife, it would make sense to make him squirm a bit before killing him. Overall, I just liked it. And it made sense for not to reveal Blofeld's face because that was Blofeld's gimmick for quite a lot of films. We never saw his real face. Overall, I just liked how the execution and how this whole death was done. I'm one of the minorities who actually liked this death because in more recent videos, you rarely see this death come up. I personally like it and enjoy it. just like with Scaramangas. And yeah, I just think this should be an iconic death in the series, but it rarely is. Speaking of iconic deaths, number 8, the deaths of Professor Dent and Dr. No. Okay, these are the deaths that set the precedent with Bond killing his enemies. First off, Professor Dent was pretty much, he could arguably the henchman of the film. And basically, well, he comes to go and kill Bond, and basically uses up all his bullets, shooting the bed who he thinks Bond's in, but it's actually a bunch of pillows. He then goes into the place where Bond's in and reveals it was never him. Now, Dent doesn't know he's used up all his bullets, and as Bond is explaining everything, Dent is secretly bringing the gun closer to him, with Bond on the wiser, eventually getting his gun, attempting to shoot him, but it's blank. And it reveals that Bond knows he's been counting the bullets. Automatically, he then goes, "That's a Smith & Wesson, and you've had your sex." Not just that was both cool, badass, but also cold. Like, he killed an unarmed man in cold blood. That also set the precedent for what Bond is. He's a rogue spy. You know, he's a bit of not a rogue spy. Actually, correction, he's a bit of a rogue in him as a Actually, no, rogue's not a good word, but you get the idea. That killing is so cold-blooded. A man who will get the job done. Something I really appreciate and would like for more films to incorporate that a little bit more. So yeah, I just like how that, and of course, the death of Dr. No is also iconic. The first main villain death at the hands of Bond. I like how the whole fighting is done. It's a bit clunky, granted, but I just find it's so iconic. It needs to be touched upon, and as a result, I like how he's literally boiled alive. It's actually brutal to die like that. Die in boiling radioactive water. Jeez, no one can come back from that. And I also like how his metal hands become his undoing. You see, as they get closer to the water, Bond has managed to grab himself to safety, but because of his metal hands, they're too clunky to grab onto anything, and so he slips into the radioactive water. Automatically, these deaths are some of the first in the series that are iconic and also set the precedent for deaths to come. The reason why they are at number 8 is because you can poke at the logic as to how Dr. No would have died, but also the sound effects to Professor Dent, like with that gun, it's a little bit dated. But overall, I find the deaths that they are the first in the series and need to be touched upon as well. They are the first deaths in the series. They set the precedent for films to come and for the creative team to really come up with new and more fantastic ways of killing off the villains. Number 7. Bond kills Red Grant. Now, this death is certainly significant in the series, as it was one of the first times Bond actually has to fight one of his villains on a train. As you can see, that's actually happened quite a lot in the series. It's happened beyond this film, Bond fighting on a train has happened in films like Live and Let Die, The Spy Who Loved Me, Octopussy, definitely know that, and even Skyfall, up to Skyfall, and Spectre. Bond literally fights either in the train or on top of a train. It's literally a staple for this to happen, at least in some films. Overall, I just find that this whole sequence to be very good. First off, how it's played. Bond immediately deduces that Grant is not who we say he is, but is quickly subdued by Grant, his gun's removed, and he's literally at death's door. You know, Grant points a gun at him, and he's literally vulnerable. He's out of options. Eventually, of course, a gadget comes into play that saves him, but even then, he's still in a. It's more than it still doesn't save him. He's still in a fight for his life. It's literally an assassin going up against a secret agent. I just like how, and also it's brutal for the times. I'm sure it would have been very brutal, very violent, and I really enjoy it. And I like how Connery really sells it that he can handle himself, and the actor who plays Red Grant as well. Eventually, and I also like, again, it's also another case where the villain's gimmick, which is a wire within the watch, essentially becomes his own undoing, as Bond quickly strangles him and kills him. And then, of course, there's that line that Sean Connery always gets with such confidence and finesse. Wow. Again, this death is another iconic one, and I like how it's just filmed and the environment of it all. You think about it, a fight in a small space doesn't sound that epic, but they managed to pull it off. I like how also brutal it would have been for the time. And that's what I love about old cinema. They really know how to make films now. These days, they really don't. It's more like, what can we chuck together and hope we get a few couple of bucks out of it? They knew what they were doing. And I give credit, this is a really great death. And we knew from the beginning of the film, that scene, that this guy was going to go up against Bond, and Bond was definitely going to be in a whole lot of trouble when he does. Again, and I really felt that they really did this fantastically well. And this is another really great example of a really good, well, great choreography and just great cinematography and and basically filming to really make this death one of the most iconic and interesting in the series. I really appreciate it. Number 6, Bond kills Max Zorin, the last Roger Moore Bond kill of the film series. Oh, yeah, I guess you could say. At least where he physically has his thing. Now, let's address an elephant in the room with this death, though, that I'm sure I'm going to get in the comments. Bond was, at this point in the series, was played by Roger Moore at the age of 58. And Bond is usually a person, a young man. So that is going up against Max Zorin, who is played by Christopher Walken, a fantastic actor in his own right. I like how, first off, how they're fighting on top of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, and I just like how that axe comes into play. And despite the silliness of it all, I like how just before Max falls to his death, basically to the river, I like how he's struggling to stay on and lets out that little laugh, like he like he finds the whole scene funny in question, then slips and falls. Again, we can all agree Max Zorin is one of the most psychotic villains of the series, and I find that his death just it had to be special, and I find that it was done very well here. Of course, people might be mad, why would you put this death above Red Grant? Well, again, I just find this death to be, I don't know, there's something about this death, I just knew I had to put it before Red. I don't know what exactly, but I knew it had to be, I knew I just had to. Maybe it's because of that laugh he makes before he dies as the icing on the cake for me, or that swinging that axe and just going full nutso compared to Red Grant. Maybe that's the thing. I don't know, but there's something that's telling me this death needs to be put higher than Red Grant's, and I just like this death. That's all I can say. I find it absolutely well choreographed, and just how brutal it is. That's all I can say. Coming in at number 5, the Bond kills Goldfinger and Oddjob. These are another iconic deaths in the series, and really where the more outlandish deaths really came from. You see, before this, the deaths were really tamed, and they just and for this, with Goldfinger being a little bit more fantastical, coming into the mixture of the series, as in, with this more like not fantastical as in like fantasy supernatural type thing, as in it's just a little bit more of the absurdity of the film series slowly peaked in this film. First off, how did these villains die? For the Oddjob was the first one to be killed off in the film at the very end film, where Bond is trying to defuse this bomb, but before he can, he has to fight off Oddjob. And of course, Oddjob's lost his signature bowler hat, and of course, Bond doing fist fight, hitting him with whatever he can get his hands on isn't affecting him. Then of course, there's this bit of wire that is pretty much electrical still off, and he sees this bowler hat. And naturally, he picks it up. And we naturally think, well, he's going to kill Oddjob with his own bowler hat. He then throws up, but it misses. Oddjob then gets a smirk and goes towards it. He then sees the wire. He goes towards the bar because the hat is lodged in these bars. And just as Oddjob touches the hat, he puts it against these bars, and it bloody electrocutes him. And that yell, then he goes up against the bars and then falls, essentially killing him. He's been electrocuted to death, and it's brutal, it's a little bit silly, and it's just iconic. Then, of course, there's the death of Goldfinger. Goldfinger's lost everything, and he wants to kill off Bond just before he goes into hiding. A classic villain mistake. They fight on the plane, and a bullet shoots through the window, and Bond manages to hold on to something, but Goldfinger, I'm sorry, it's Goldfinger, not Blofeld. Goldfinger gets sucked out of the plane. Now, the cinema, that the filming is a bit dated, but I just like how it was done, and it was also foreshadowed in the film, saying can't shoot bullets in planes as it will go through stuff. So yeah, I just liked how the death was done, how it was filmed, and they're just iconic. And the little bit of the absurdity of it all was first laid grounds in this film, and I just like it for those reasons alone. Number 4, Bond kills Elektra and Volpe. Now, these are the only villains on the kill count, at least on the killing list, that are girls. Not being now, why do I have these two? Because how Bond kills them is in a cold way, and how it's done is definitely great due to the cinematography and even to the writing, to its credit. Now, how it's done, how Elektra dies. Now, Elektra is the first main villain in a Bond film to be female, something we haven't had yet up in the series, and we still haven't. The females are usually relegated in a Bond film to either be eye candy, or just minor or supporting characters, or even working for the villain. Again, something we still yet to really see as another main villain. I thought Elektra was a really great addition to the series, and was done fanatically and very great to her own credit. And I like how Bond falls for her. And even in that moment where you just don't know if Bond's gonna pull the trigger and kill her, essentially Elektra still thinks she still has power over him, and essentially, taunts him. And yeah, you can see Bond a little bit hesitant. Then she overplays her hand, and Bond shoots her. Point blank, cold blood. And you can see that Bond feels a little bit of remorse after killing her. Something I find very interesting and very different. Then, of course, there's the case of Volpe's death in Thunderball. Now, this is the first time I think Bond in the series has actually killed a woman. I like how it was done. Bond is he's on the run. He's got no gun, no gadget, and he ends up in a dance club type thing. Eventually runs into Volpe, and they are forced to dance on basically the dance floor. And he's surrounded by thugs blocking the entrances, and they fire and there's a gun. And the pacing builds up to it, the whole thing, and then eventually the gun goes off. But Bond uses her as a shield and essentially kills her. Now, you could definitely argue if it was an accident or if Bond knew on purpose. It's still up to debate. But I like the idea that how he literally used her as a human shield. He then, of course, puts her dead body at a chair at this table with a bunch of other people there, and literally says, just as he leaves, "Do you mind if my friend sits one out? Don't worry, she's just dead." I chuckled at that. It's a dark line, but I chuckled at it. I like how Bond has these women killed is in cold blood, and each are done so differently. As first off, Volpe is the first time. Correct me if in the comments I'm wrong, but I believe the first time Bond has killed a woman in the series. And the death of Elektra is really cold, but you also see just that Bond, Bond's emotions from before killing her and then after killing her. And it just shows that even though, despite what he might feel with Elektra, he's still an assassin, as an agent that gets the job done, and the same with Volpe. And I just like how these women are strong, confident, and not bimbos like you would normally expect from it, when they see Bond. So I find that really interesting and really great. Now, number 3, Bond kills 006. Now, Bond versus another 00 agent. What could go wrong with this? Nothing. It is a great concept, and I like how the fighting takes a long while. You see their skills in shooting, in hand-to-hand combat, how brutal it is. It really, I just find it's like another Red Grant level from that train sequence. And Alex actually comes out on top for a while but then of course Bond's quick thinking manages to save his hide. But then of course the fight still goes on until eventually because they're fighting on this like satellite around the satellite dish, and they get to this bottom end where there's no further else to go. If you step off, you die. But Bond finally gets his chance to defeat Alec, but quickly catches him. And savoring the moment a bit, just as Alex says, "For England, James?" Bond then says, "No, for me." Then drops him. He lands, but he's still alive. Bond manages to quickly get off just as the satellite dish explodes and basically falls on Alec, killing him. Now, there's no way he could have survived that, but that death was just so... I was like how it was filmed, the fighting really shows their fighting skills, the camera work, choreography, and just like how good Alec was, because his fighting was actually he was actually on top. No way Bond could have won if it wasn't for some cheeky moves, which again shows just how Bond's quick thinking always saves him. So that's another reason I like it. Sean Bean here really does really great at portraying 006, Alex Trevelyan. And I just find the whole death to be brutal, and the fact that even though he normally a fool would have killed him, he still lives. It's only when that satellite dish, when it's destroyed and on fire, falls on him, it finally kills him, burns him alive. Holy Christ, that's one hell of a way to go. And the fact that he essentially broken his legs and I'm sure maybe a bit of his back, he couldn't move. All he could do is watch that fall on him, which is dark. Yeah, I just like that death. Now, coming in at number 2, Bond kills Vol Locu. Okay, one of the most obscure Bond villains from the series, but arguably I put it here because it is literally Roger Moore's darkest kill, and that's saying, and yeah, because Roger Moore's track record in killing his villains or his enemies is usually in a light-hearted, cheeky way. But this was really dark. You see, what happened was, Bond is chasing him, and the guy chasing the villain in his car. He eventually ends up shooting him in the shoulder through, like, when he's driving, shoots him through the shoulder, and he ends on the side of a cliff. Half the car is barely on it, while slightly falling. He then goes up to him and throws in this little lapel pin that he recovered from a former ally who got killed. And that slightly has the car slightly fall over. Now, originally, Roger Moore did not want to do this. He simply wanted to chuck that lapel pin in the car, and then the car would have fallen down, essentially killing the guy, as he's basically, the car rolled down the cliff, he falls out of the door, and basically hits his head against a bunch of rocks. But it wasn't. The director insisted that he kicked the car, essentially resulting in the car falling down. I really liked that they went with that, as it showed, as again, it fit the tone of the film, and this was really to show that Roger Moore could do anything beyond the lighthearted. This was a really good attempt to show Roger Moore could do a darker take on Bond, and I just like how he just coldly kicks the car down, knowing he's trying to get out, knowing that the car was slowly starting to fall, but he just quickened the process. This is a great example of really Roger Moore being really dark at Bond, and essentially just prove he can do something beyond the lighthearted take. And I just like that it is a dark death from Roger Moore, so that's why it's at number 2. It's always stuck with me. But It doesn't take the cake on being the darkest Bond kill. That honor goes to my number one. Ladies and gentlemen, drum roll please for my number one greatest Bond kill. Bond kills Fran Sanchez. License to Kill is hailed as the darkest Bond film. And the villain of this film is perhaps one of the best. It's one of the best, one of the most well written, well acted, and overall just a really great and fantastical villain. And I felt that his death had to be dark to suit the film, and it's a dark death. And I like how throughout the film, Bond is trying to kill him. He's chasing him, nothing's stopping him, and the whole tanker chase scene prior to his death was Bond constantly trying to get to him. Eventually, the chase ends with the tanker truck going over over a small cliff, and there's just a bunch of gasoline everywhere. Now, and Bond's badly injured, and he doesn't see Sanchez until Sanchez comes out of nowhere and has a machete up to him, puts him on a rock, and tells him he could have had everything. Now, before the kill, this is what happened. He is covered in gasoline. He's covered in gasoline, and he's bloody, and he's just about to kill Bond. And now, also at the beginning of the film, Bond has this lighter that Felix gave him at the beginning of the film, and it comes into play just before he dies, and I felt it's very poetic and works very well. And basically, he lights him on fire, and just listen. And setting him on fire didn't kill him, well, when Sanchez is on fire, he goes towards the tanker truck and literally causes an explosion. So essentially, if the fire didn't kill him, the explosion did. And it made sense for him to go out this way, with a more violent way. But I like how the lighter came into play, with even in that final moment, Sanchez understood why Bond did all this. He was avenging Felix. And yeah, one hell of a way for a villain to go out, even for a Bond film. And that's why it's my number one. It's brutal, it's violent, and it's just fantastical. For me, License to Kill is really an absolute should be considered a classic gem for the Bond series. And I just like how just super violent the whole film is. And the death for its villain is really great. Now, they could have easily just done, as the tanker went over, he literally, the tanker truck could have literally fell on him and killed him like that. But no, they went with this way, and it was brutal. And that's what I want more Bond villains' deaths to be. Some I want to be brutal and dark, while the rest to be a little bit more lighthearted and comedic. Something we are losing more, as they want to be more realistic. And that's why no Daniel Craig deaths are on here. Not that I don't find them enjoyable. In fact, I really considered on having, where Daniel Craig does his first two Bond kills in the beginning of Casino Royale on the list. But I just find these deaths to be far more enjoyable and entertaining, and there's no way I could have put any of that, any of those deaths, and, just those deaths on this list when I enjoyed these ones so much. But in many ways, what I'm doing is also giving them a shout out, a little bit of an honorable mention. But yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, and there we have it, ladies and gentlemen, my top 10 Bond kills. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Leave your own leave your own choices in the comments. Tell me, what would you have as your number one? Yeah. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe if you haven't. Leave any comments for your favorites in the list, or or even if ones I even didn't include on the list, please also leave those. I'm more than interested to hear other people's choices. For the next Bond related video, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be doing, well, something I've actually decided that it's about time, and also a ranking of all the 6 Bond actors from my least favorite to my personal favorite. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Steven Hour, and enjoy the rest of your day, and so long for now.